Hey, you're listening to the Rise Podcast. Today, we're tackling the biggest challenges in the battery industry. You'll learn the latest bottlenecks and limitations in battery technology. You'll discover public companies working on these issues and how you could potentially invest in them. If what you learn resonates with you, we'll also show you the degrees to pursue, the education you should get, and give you insight into the day-to-day life of professionals working in this field. You can also use what you learn in this episode to start your own entrepreneurial journey. Let's get into it. Claire Gray, professor of chemistry at the University of Cambridge. To truly overcome the bottlenecks in battery technology, we must focus on not only advancing chemistry, but also improving the manufacturing process and recycling process, end quote. All right, guys. So before we get started, the first question you should be thinking is, what is a battery? Well, to keep it simple, a battery is a device that stores energy and provides power to electrical devices when needed. Now, let me give you a little bit more technical definition of what a battery is. A battery is a device that converts chemical energy into electrical energy through electrochemical reactions. It consists of two electrodes, the anode and the cathode, and an electrolyte. During discharge, electrons flow from the anode to the cathode through an external circuit, generating electric current. And to drive it all home, let me just give you a simple analogy. A battery is like a water tank. The tank stores water or energy. When you open the tap or connect the circuit, water flows out or electricity flows out to do work like turning a water wheel or powering a device. So I hope that makes sense. That's essentially what a battery is. So the next question is going to naturally be, what are the most common type of batteries that exist in the world? Well, the most common type of batteries that exist in the world is going to be the lithium ion battery, then the lead acid battery, and then lastly, the nickel metal hydride battery. And I'm going to keep it super simple for you. The reason that the most common battery in the world is the lithium ion battery is because of its energy density, its safety, and its lightweight. And so you could put it in all the advanced consumer electronics that you see in the world, from smartphones to iPhones to cameras to watches. It can hold a lot of energy in a small form factor. So if you think about your iPhone, for instance, you carry it around all day in your pocket, and that iPhone could pretty much last for 24 hours without having to recharge it. That's a great ability to hold a lot of power in a small device that's very, very light, which is the battery inside of that iPhone. And that's why it's the most used battery in the world. It represents over 63% of all batteries in the battery market. The second most used battery in the world is a lead acid battery. It represents 31% of the global market for batteries. And that's basically used most of the time in cars. It's a very heavy battery, but the reason the lead acid battery is used for cars is because it has a high surge power capacity. That means it can shoot out a lot of power very, very fast. As you can see, that would be needed to crank up something big like a car. It's also used for backup power as well. So generators and backup storage units that can hold a lot of power and shoot it out and run buildings and run backup generators, etc. So that's the second most common battery in the world. And then lastly, there's the nickel metal hydride battery. It represents only 5% of the market. It's basically what you're going to see like Duracell. They're not as good as the lithium ion batteries, but they're cost effective, they're cheap. And so you're going to see those batteries used to put batteries into like phones and remotes and video game consoles. It's basically Duracell and Energizer, the actual rechargeable batteries. And so they only represent 5% of the market. So it's pretty logical, right? We're in the modern world. So you're going to need your highest quality battery that's light, that can hold a lot of energy, that's safe. You're going to put that in your high-end technology, right? Phones and all these devices we're making in the modern world. And then naturally, everybody in the modern world wants a car, whether it's China or India, everybody wants cars. So you're going to need those liquid acid batteries for that. And then lastly, your small consumer battery. So makes total sense. That's the battery market as a whole. So now you got a general idea of the type of batteries out there. The next big question becomes, what are the top 3 countries controlling the raw materials for battery production in general? Well, the top country in the world would be Australia. They have about 52% of the world's lithium supply. On an annual basis, they produced about 86,000 metric tons of lithium in 2023. And why? Because they're rich in lithium reserves and they have a significant nickel reserves. And they're major exporters to China for processing. Next, it is Chile. Chile controls approximately 25% of the world's lithium supply. Last year, they produced 44,000 metric tons of lithium as of 2023. They have the largest lithium brine deposits in the world. They have substantial reserves, ensuring long-term supply and strategic government involvement in resource control. And lastly, China. They refine 80% of the lithium in the world. That is a humongous deal. You need to understand that ultimately, once you refine this lithium, that's what basically make the batteries, which means that almost everybody in the world has to go through China. There's another thing to remember. Remember, the US potentially in 2024 could be on a basically war path with China over Taiwan in the next 10 years, which means that once we start having bad relations, they can basically block us out of the supply chain, driving up costs for batteries, making batteries scarce and slowing us down for our energy future, while giving China a head start in getting closer to a energy future. With access to that much battery refining capacity, they'll be able to hit economy of scale, reduce the cost of batteries, basically take the lead in autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles, which they already are doing now. Now, China produced 33,000 metric tons of lithium in 2023. They dominate refining and processing capacity, making it critical for converting raw materials into battery grade chemicals. They're also the largest producer of graphite for anodes. So this is a humongous big deal. And basically, you want to keep your eye on China because China is going to become a massive competitor, not only to the US for energy in general, but for Tesla when it comes to actually making better batteries. You know, Tesla's currently working on their gigafactory. So basically, keep China front and center. So the next question becomes, what is the biggest technological challenge facing the battery industry today? If I had to pick the number one challenge that's preventing us from getting to the energy future that we want, I would have to say it's energy density. Not only energy density, but energy density and safety, which is directly connected, because we also have to be able to do that in a way that's safe enough we're willing to use the batteries. So even though we can probably get batteries to store more energy than they currently do, the question is, can you do it safely where you could take these batteries and start selling them and use them in the real world? And essentially, that is the biggest challenge. So if you think about it, why does this matter? Well, that means that if you're able to take a laptop battery, or even better example would be a Apple iPhone battery. Right now, if you don't use your phone all day, that battery could probably stay charged for 24 hours. But if we're able to pack more energy into that little battery that's in your phone, then you can keep your phone on for 5 days without recharging it. Well, that type of battery power opens up possibilities for a whole new type of devices that we could create. And just think about if you could take that same improvement and put it into electric cars. Right now, let's say your gas cost to get fuel for a traditional combustion engine is $2.50 per gallon. You can basically charge your battery for about 11 cents per kilowatt. That's just to get, let's say, a 200-mile range. If we're able to double that, and now you can get 400-mile range out of your car for only 11 cents a gallon, that's transformational. That's enough improvement for people with combustion engines to say, hey, maybe I should buy an electric car. Now, all of a sudden, millions of people have electric cars. That's not depending on fossil fuels, which is cleaning up the environment. And as you can see, the effects are bigger and bigger and bigger. But I want to give you like a more simplistic analogy that's easier for you to understand. Imagine if you had a sponge that can only absorb so much water. Well, graphite anodes can only hold a certain number of lithium ions. Similar to a bucket that's already full, common cathodes also materials are near their maximum storage capacity as well. So the anode is where the energy starts, and then the cathode is where it pushes the energy to create the charge. Both of those materials that are used have a limited capacity to store energy. So that means that if you have a battery, part of it is the anode, part of it is the cathode, and they only can put so much energy in both of those sides of the battery before it's full. Now, I'm just going to give you a simplistic analogy of why energy density is limited. Because lithium-ion batteries are made of very specific material, like graphite, that the ions must run through that graphite. And what happens is if you try to pack more ions in that graphite, it's like being in a crowded room and now you're squished together, and the body heat of being so close to a whole bunch of people in that room starts to mess with the heating levels, and then the walls start breaking down in the batteries, things start overheating, and chemical reactions are too close where they can't even have their chemical reactions without causing explosions or overheating and destroys the battery. So that's not a perfect definition, but basically the issue is a material science issue where they need to find better materials that can either hold more energy without getting overheating, without just degrading over time, or they need to find new configurations to set up the battery in such a way where it allows for more energy by how you configure the battery. Basically, it requires scientific material science and engineering innovation. And that's the current biggest challenge in the battery industry. Now, there's a few more other challenges that you would want to know, but that's definitely the biggest challenge that's going to have the biggest impact on improving batteries for the future. Before we wrap it up, I do want to tell you some of the other major challenges that the battery industry is generally facing. So one of those is going to be supply chain. So there's a limited amount of basically nickel in the world, a limited amount of lithium in the world. And so only about a few countries control this, like China, there's Australia, and then there is Chile. So these four countries, and basically you have governments, you have large multinational corporations, individual entrepreneurs, and industry in general basically need access to this stuff. And prior to the EV revolution that's been happening with Tesla, has been happening in China, been going on really for the last 8 to 10 years, getting access to the material was fairly stable, but there's been a exponential growth in the amount of lithium being used, given the fast shift that we see coming with what we're seeing coming with electric vehicles. More and more cars are being made electric, which requires more larger amounts of lithium, because lithium ion batteries is pretty much the most efficient, safe, and energy dense batteries you can use to put in cars to get the use case that you need. Now, traditional car batteries that were used to just crank up a car were lead acid batteries, but given that there's no more combustion engines in these electric cars, they need a stable, energy dense, weight controlled battery that can do that. And right now, our best use case at scale with safety will be our lithium ion batteries. And so you're seeing an exponential growth in the amount of supply chain requirements across the world. And that's going to be a challenge moving into the future. Furthermore, as I said earlier in this presentation, China's controlling over 80% of lithium production. That means that they're refining lithium where it's ready to use in batteries, and they're controlling a significant portion of that production. That causes major problems in the future, because as we see the axes align in the confluence of geopolitical events that's folding in 2024, we're moving towards some type of global conflict, and that conflict is going to put us on a head-on collision with both Russia and China. And so if you think about it from a battery perspective, that means that we can have major supply chain disruption. So the only way to defend against that is to start onshoring some of this manufacturing, as you can see what Tesla is doing. I think one of the reasons Tesla is building the Gigafactory in Texas is not only to be a vertically integrated company, but also to defend against the true nature of what's going on in China. And Tesla knows, because some of Tesla's biggest customers and biggest production sites is actually happening in China. He knows that China's leading the electric car revolution. He knows what he's up against. And that's why he made very, very strong decisions, which is good, to start producing batteries. And who knows, he might end up becoming an energy company, because if a war kicks off, not only will he be making lithium ion batteries in Texas, but other companies may potentially want to start using him as their source of batteries. So that's something you definitely want to know. Lastly, this is another major challenge, given that there's a limited amount of natural resources in the ground like lithium, nickel, and cobalt, similar to oil. Then you want to maximize your use of these materials. A lot of batteries, I think 50% of batteries, according to a case study in Europe, get thrown out and end up in landfills. So as an industry as a whole, one of their big challenges is coming up with strategies to actually recycle these batteries, reintegrate them into manufacturing. So that way you'll be able to significantly reduce the overall reliance on batteries globally. So that's what's going on. That's what you need to know. I really appreciate your time for watching this segment. In the next segment, what we're going to be discussing is actually a public company that's currently working on solving this problem of energy density. We're going to identify the investment opportunities and why you should look into it in the next episode. Let's get into it.